All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ansible 101 webinar. Just to confirm, can everyone see my screen?
We can.
Cool, perfect. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off, and then I will pass it over to the presenter today, Wes. But good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Introduction to Ansible 101 webinar. Before we begin, I will be taking a few minutes to give you a brief overview who we are at Fierce, what we can expect to learn in today's webinar today, and then introduce our speaker and let you know how you can get additional training from us here at Fierce. So, Fierce Software is a small woman-owned business specializing in reselling enterprise open source software for our public sector customers with a specific focus on federal system integrators. Some specific value-add elements that we bring are innovation brokering, licensing management, professional services, formal training, and custom technology enablement workshops and webinars like we're in today. Our perspective as a reseller means that when we hear goals and technology challenges, we respond from the perspective of our portfolio and not as a single vendor solution. We love to be able to be an innovation broker and get our customers access to the smartest people and best technology we can find. We like to hear the entire challenge and then take ownership of finding customers a complete solution. In addition to being an innovation broker, we offer several other value adds. If you need professional services as part of an install or for ongoing access to professional expertise, we work with vendor professional services and can bundle those for you. This is both uncleared resources as well as cleared resources. We also provide access to formal training. Today, we're specifically going to be talking about Red Hat training and how this is something we can provide for you and your team. Today's webinar is an example of one of our technology enablement webinars. We designed these as a free session for best practices for you and your team. If you see anything today that fits, we'd love to follow up and see how we can help you. If this wasn't a fit for you, let us know where we can fill the gaps and fill specific needs for you. Now, speaking of all of the enterprise open source vendors Fierce Software represents, I had to put a humble brag out here today to showcase all the awards we've won. We are proud that our work serving public sector customers has resulted in such a full trophy case in such a short period of time. Now, let's take a quick look at what you can expect to learn in the webinar today. So we will have a technical overview of Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform, go over the benefits of using Red Hat Ansible and Ansible Tower. We will be able to highlight the key new features in Ansible Platform 2.0. I'm not sure if everyone has been able to check it out, but super cool and lots of new updates. And then an outline of the Ansible Curriculum offered by the Red Hat training team. Our speaker today is Wes Urquhart. He is an Associate Solutions Architect at Red Hat, covering all things Red Hat training and certification has to offer. Wes is currently actively pursuing multiple Red Hat certifications, but truly enjoys a conversation about integration and application development. After the webinar, if something you would like to discuss is formal training and how you can access that, please visit our Fierce web store, and we will also be giving away a discount code at the end of the webinar, so stay tuned for that. And then, as I mentioned, after the webinar, you're going to be receiving an email from the training team over here at Fierce. We will provide all contact information if you have any follow-up conversations that you would like to have or give any additional feedback, please feel free. But now I will stop sharing my screen and I will go ahead to pass it over to you, Wes.
Thank you, Olivia. Let me share my screen and then just confirm that everybody can hear me and see my screen all right.
Yeah, I see everything.
Perfect, and hopefully here too. Good deal. All right, as Olivia mentioned, thanks for that introduction. My name is Wes Urquhart. I'm an Associate Solutions Architect in the North America Training Group at Red Hat. I'm excited to be here to talk about the Ansible Automation Platform with you all today. So just a brief overview of what we'll be discussing, some background on Red Hat, who we are, and how Ansible fits into our overall portfolio and strategy, as well as why the Ansible Automation Platform for your automation needs, and then what makes a platform, the word platform at the end of Ansible Automation there, what makes it a platform, what components go into it, and then, of course, what's new in AAP2, goes over some new features, some updates. Everything we talk about kind of leading into that still certainly applies to AAP2. There'll be some places where I highlight some differences, but we'll kind of talk about that as we go. And then, of course, we'll spotlight some training at Red Hat, the curriculum for Ansible, and talk about some next steps kind of on your learning journey. And then at the end, of course, question and answer. If you have questions throughout the presentation, my colleague Rob Locke, who's also a solutions architect in our training group, is out there somewhere in the presentation, and he'll answer questions in the chat as best he can. But at the end, of course, we'll kind of gather those questions where we can, answer some at the end live if there's any left, and then, of course, take them back with us if we can and answer what we can do. Okay, with that background. So when most folks think Red Hat, I think the words Linux and open source come to mind, and that's a good thing, right? That's where Red Hat's bread has been buttered forever, and it's kind of what we're synonymous with. But over the last few years, we've sort of kind of redeveloped our core strategy around an open hybrid cloud vision, right? And those are centered around three pillars: hybrid cloud infrastructure, cloud native development, and management and automation. Hybrid cloud infrastructure meaning, we can have your infrastructure, of course, built on RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, with OpenShift and containerization on, any cloud or even on-premise bare metal. Wherever you need to be, in multiple places even, we're there for you. And then cloud native development. So, in turn, while you sort of have your infrastructure on the cloud, the ability to give developers tools to deploy and manage any application or environment and give them what they need to innovate on the cloud and build more applications that way. And then management and automation, where we're going to focus most of our time today. Now you've got things in the cloud, you've got this wide ecosystem, you've got to be able to manage it effectively and, of course, automate where you can to eliminate inefficiencies and sort of enhance compliance and those sorts of things. So as we take this and overlay it into the portfolio that we have here at Red Hat, if my slide deck would cooperate, what you'll see is at its base, as you see everything highlighted in red toward the bottom, of course, everything on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, still the core, still the foundation of what we do. But then you've got the option here of having OpenShift on OpenStack, or maybe bare metal, or any of our partners, AWS, IBM Cloud, Azure, all the way out to the edge. And that's sort of that hybrid cloud infrastructure component we talked about. And then in green, you've got that cloud native development suite, right? So anything from Red Hat integration tools, process automation tools, et cetera, what developers need to get the job done. And then on the left in blue, you see this management and automation section. And this is where we're going to spend most of our time today. Now, you may have heard of things like Red Hat Insights and Red Hat Satellite, things that give you proactive analytics, things that tell you, what security patches you may need to take, that kind of thing, which works across the suite. And those are great. And those are great products. But we're going to focus most of our time today talking about Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform. And what I love most about the way Ansible sits in this graphic is it kind of goes across, because Ansible has a lot of tentacles, and you can automate just about anything in the portfolio and beyond with it. So kind of think of it as stretching across the whole thing. And so when we talk about Ansible and we talk about automation, we fundamentally talk about a challenge, right? And many organizations face the same challenge. I think we've all been there before, where there's lots of teams that are in silos, and they sort of develop their own tools and ways of doing things, where, the security team, they might have a configuration management tool, right? They might use, say, Puppet to manage configuration in their enterprise systems for security profiles, to make sure folks have the same roles and the same privileges packages every single time to ensure compliance. And that's great. I'm sure that they've done that very well and very efficiently. And then developers and DevOps groups, they may just be running bash scripts, right, in their Linux boxes in order to automate various different steps. And those work great too. But the problem with stuff like that is 5 or 6 years down the road, when those people leave the organization, you get on the phone with support and you start thinking through, well, what does this do? No one was really around when this was developed. We understand that it runs at the end of the day. We understand that we think it needs to be there, but we can't tell really why it needs to be there and what it does, and we can't really unwind it. And that's, spending valuable time and resources on figuring out something that was there, that was working. And maybe you decide, in your silo, you no longer need it, But then there's dependencies to consider, right? Maybe that script didn't do anything for the developers right there, but maybe it was key to the network operations team. Maybe it was key to the way they provisioned routers, right, and configured routers. And maybe someone else will notice that that script is no longer there, and no one will know why something stopped working. And that's sort of the problem when you start developing these sort of unintegrated tools in silos is people don't really talk and know what's going on in each place. So where do you want to get to kind of with that as the problem statement? Well, connected teams and coordinated automation, right? Seems to make sense. You want to make sure your teams are connected and understand what's going on beyond just their domain, right? Understand what's happening upstream and downstream of them in the business to know how their work may affect somebody else and sort of foster that DevOps culture. And then on the flip side of that, coordinate automation to reduce your inefficiencies. You know, if everyone's using the same tool and the same language to automate, you no longer have that problem of, hey, 5 or 6 years down the road, you don't know what this was or why it was there. And of course, anytime you sort of condense things into one tool, you minimize errors and downtime, reduce the complexity in your environment, and sort of improve your understanding and improve your visibility across different teams. And so, you know, you're uniting those teams, you're automating tasks easier, and you're creating that collaborative environment. And, you know, you're breaking down those silos. And to me, what's most important is that consistent governance point right here, right? So consistent governance, when everyone is playing in the same sandbox and everyone's using the same tool and everyone's doing sort of the same kind of thing, you can play by the same rules. And everyone can understand where the guide rails are and what you can and cannot do and what you do and don't need to talk about with other folks. So in comes Ansible, right? Of course, I think all of you knew where this was headed. All of those things we can do with the Ansible Automation Platform, right? Improve efficiency, increase productivity, and control risks and expenses. And that's, you know, you're wondering, okay, Ansible Automation Platform, it's an automation tool, but that's great. And we can do those things, but why Ansible specifically, right? Why the Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform? Glad you asked. So a few different pieces, powerful. I hinted at this earlier when we were talking about the portfolio, you know, how Ansible can automate across all of the different Red Hat products and beyond. We mean that, you know, when we say automate anything with Ansible or automate everything with Ansible, we pretty much mean it. You can use Ansible as a tool to powerfully automate across your entire ecosystem. But at the same time, it's simple. An automation tool, or any tool for that matter, that folks don't understand or can't use is just going to sit on the shelf, right? You're not going to be able to get your full utility out of it. You're not going to be able to really fully realize the impact of what that tool could do for you. You know, Ansible Automation Platform is really simple and really easy to understand, to where with just a little bit of education, a little bit of study, you can understand what a playbook is doing, what the, you know, fundamental automation scripts within Ansible are doing. And then agentless. This is a big one. So because you know, to automate with Ansible, you don't have to have it running, an agent running on the host you're automating. All you have to do is have access, you know, credentials, just like you would to log into any other system. And you have to run it on a control node, right? And from there, you can automate across the entire ecosystem, which is really cool. So these three things together sort of compose this really powerful tool set that Ansible has to offer. And the other thing I think is important to note is when you kind of think about being able to automate everything with Ansible, the word automate in there. The word automate means something different to different people, right? It can be orchestrating for certain folks. It can be configuration management, provisioning and deprovisioning, and to various different targets, right? Well, if you say, I've got an automation tool, but that automation tool is for, you know, just provisioning servers, right? Well, that's not going to work for the security team that just wants to manage configuration in their enterprise applications. Ansible can do all of those things. So you can do configuration management in your applications. You can provision or deprovision servers. You can do managed configurations on your network devices, et cetera, so on and so forth. You know, if you're an IT, if you're a developer and you want to orchestrate APIs against certain applications, you can do that too. It's one of those things where the word automate, if you think it means something in general with the Ansible Automation Platform, it does mean that. And that's really cool because, you know, you've seen tools, I'm sure all of us have, where we think it's one thing and then in reality it's meant for somebody else. And that can be frustrating. So in this case, it's really cool to see that Ansible has, you know, this broad definition of automation, and it really means it. And then, of course, you know, 90 plus certified platforms. I think, actually, don't quote me on this, but I think we're 100 plus at this point. where we've got Red Hat certified content where, you fire up Ansible Automation Platform from day one, and you've got these pre-built automation. You open it out of the box and you're ready to automate with all of these certified connections, right? So if you want to automate, your Cisco network routers, you can do that. If you just want to automate your Red Hat Enterprise Linux boxes, done, no problem. All of the above, absolutely. And the other thing that's great about having the certified content is we keep it updated, and we work with our partners to make sure that it stays up to date, so that when you pick a piece of automation for that Cisco router, you can rest assured that it's going to work, and it's going to work every time, and it's going to stay up to date, because that's what we're here for. And that's kind of what makes Ansible a platform, or it's part of what makes Ansible a platform, is this out-of-the-box automation that you get that is certified to work. And that actually leads really nicely into the next section, which is what makes a platform. Grab a sip of water there. So we already talked about the certified content, and I'm going to go backwards, sort of bottom up on this slide here. Certified content that we have, that is the ability to kind of go in, look at this certified stuff, and use it just to automate, kind of push button, automate right out of the box. And then, not so certified content, which we'll talk about in a little bit, via the Ansible Galaxy, which is a community where folks can publish the automation they've created, and you can use that automation, use it as inspiration, or use it right out if it works for you. It's kind of that ability to see what's out there, right? It's not just giving you the tool. It's giving you the tool plus some instructions and plus, some finished recipes, so to speak. And then cloud services, sort of the ability to click around and actually see that certified content in an easy way. Beyond that, you've got these tools that allow you to see dashboards, analytics, understand how you're automating, where you're not, and enable self-service automation too, to really give folks that may not be quite as technical, that might not be as familiar with, YAML and writing a playbook, or may not want to be, the ability to go in and automate, to give that power across your organization where necessary, right? And then, of course, Ansible automation, right? Actually, the automation itself, the ability to write those automation via playbooks, that's the core of it, right? That's the other bit that, with cloud services and certified content, that helps work it. But at the end of the day, the automation itself is the biggest piece. So if we start talking about the Ansible Automation Platform in three separate veins, in three separate activities, create, operate, and consume. Now, I've heard these referred to as personas, and I think that works in some cases, but the one place I think that's misleading is, you think persona, and you just kind of think one person doing one thing and one person fitting one role. And that in some cases is fine, but to me it's important to remember that someone can be all three of these in a given setting, in a given day. Someone can be a consumer of automation, an operator of automation, and a creator of automation. If you take, for example, a developer, right? Let's go back to my developer example from earlier, and let's say that I need to create a container or spin up a container because I want to work on a new feature for a shopping cart in our web-based storefront. Well, that's great. We can do that. So maybe I'm consuming automation in order to get some of those things provisioned for me. Instead of going out and reaching out to various teams to ask them to provision and load balance and do all these other pieces for me, I can create, I can go in and click some automation tools and say, I want to put this in order, and I want to run this in order to consume automation for myself. And that's great. And partially, I might be operating that automation too, depending on the setup and my familiarity with the Ansible Automation Platform. But then maybe I know I need to test my product. I need to test the tool I'm building. And I don't want to sit there and just run test scripts against it myself. Well, I'm going to go create some automation to automate that testing for me to see what it can do. And so then I'm going to create, operate, and consume. And in that one scenario, I'm all three of these things, right? So it's really just, these are the three pillars and three kind of interactions you can have with Ansible Automation Platform, so to speak. But one person could be fitting any three of these molds, really. So again, another way to look at it with the content creators, operators, domain experts, and users, and just the various places you can be using on-premise, the Ansible Cloud Services across all the domains, and then in the Ansible command line, of course, fueled by an open source community. Just a quick note here, the first thing you're seeing is Red Hat Ansible Controller there in the center. For the astute among you who may not be as familiar with Ansible Automation Platform 2, you might be looking for the word tower. This is the first time I'll make mention of controller replacing the word tower. We'll actually talk a little more about the specifics and what's new and sort of a comparison between the old and the new. But that's just kind of to make mention of that. As we go along, you're going to see some controller stuff and you're going to see some tower stuff. It all works together, but just know that we'll talk a bit more about that as we go. So let's dive into creating. Let's talk about how are we actually going to create the automation. So again, sort of following on with the similar graphic from before, this is a building, discovering, and trusting. So you're building the automation yourself. You're creating playbooks. You're building it out, as you would think. But then there's the discovering in the automation hub, which is where that certified content is that we talked about, as well as the Ansible Galaxy community. We'll talk a bit more about that as we go. And then, of course, all the various content domains. So this is a playbook. This is our first introduction to what a playbook looks like. And if you've never seen one before, a playbook is composed of a few different pieces, and we're going to break them down here in the next couple of slides. So a playbook is composed of plays, can be one or multiple plays, and each play is composed of one or more tasks. And the task is what's actually doing the direction, and the module within the task is what's doing the work. And we'll talk about each of those pieces and break them down. But if we take a step back, you can see that this playbook is written in what's called YAML, which, depending on who you ask, is yet another markup language, or you could define it differently. And it's fairly straightforward. It's got some nuances, some idiosyncrasies to it. But with just a few minutes of watching a video, through our learning subscription or even taking one of our courses, you can learn YAML to the point where you understand the formatting and where it needs to go and how to write it, and then, of course, how to read it. And in this case, maybe I'm not familiar with programming language in any way, shape, or form. I'm not familiar with YAML. I've never seen it before. But if I come in here and I see just the red text that my eye is drawing me to, and I see the word name next to it, I can start thinking, okay, install and start Apache. That makes sense, right? That's pretty plain language. And then package is present. Okay, that seems to make sense. It's looking to see if something is there. And then is this file present? Okay, looking to see if something is there. And then it's started. Okay, that seems to all make sense and seems to line up in a logical order. And that's sort of what we're talking about here with Ansible being something that everyone can understand, is when done in a fashion where the YAML is organized and folks are using the naming conventions well, it can be something that you can just pick up and understand. And it can also serve as your documentation. Instead of documenting separately, the playbooks themselves can be your documentation, which is really cool. Now, I've gone ahead of myself a little bit, so I want to go ahead and start breaking this down and take a step back. So again, what's in a playbook? Plays, modules, and plugins. And we're going to go through each of these three right now. So the play, what am I automating? On the right side, you're going to see that we break out the screenshot here for the overall playbook that we were just referencing. So in this case, this is the top portion, that install and start Apache, and that's kind of the name and the header. So what is it? It's the top level specification for a group of tasks. And we'll tell what host to execute the play on. So what you see here is the name, which is just what we're calling that grouping. And then the host is just where are we doing this? Where are we executing this action for the subsequent tasks? And then we'll talk about this become piece in a little bit. That's a plugin, actually. And the plays are the building blocks for a playbook. So you can have one play per playbook. And in fact, it's fairly common when you're first getting started with Ansible to just have one play per playbook, just to keep it simple. But as you go and as you start to learn and really want to dive into the Ansible Automation Platform, your playbook can start to consist of multiple plays. And again, they run in sequential order. So we'll talk a bit more about that as we keep going as well. Modules, tools in the toolkit. So modules, you're going to hear, if you take any training or start working around Ansible, you're going to hear the term modules are what does the work, right? Think of it as like a command, if you're familiar with Linux and sort of just operating in a Linux terminal. And so they're a parameterized component with internal logic representing a single step to be done. The modules actually do things. So in this case, I'm going to back up a second so you can see where this sits. So if we go back to our playbook, you're going to see this is the first task. So we're one level indented. We talked about the play and the name and all that good stuff, the host. Now we're one level down and we're indented. So we're to the first task. So the module itself in this case is the word template. And what template is like a copy function. So it's basically take something from a source and copy it to a target. And in this case, what we're saying is copy this source, this files / index.html to var /www/html, right? fairly straightforward. And it's one of those things where, once you know what the definition of the module is, once you know what the action is doing, you can kind of discern what the next set of actions are. And the modules themselves, a few words about them, they're usually Python or PowerShell for Windows, but they can be any language. And there's thousands of them, I believe, pre-done, so you don't have to build your own. There are plenty out there for you to use. But if you want to build your own, it's certainly something you can do. If you have a use case for some command or some module you really think you need, you can absolutely do that. It's no problem at all. Plugins. So we're back to the top, and this become part that's been highlighted. Think of it as pieces that augment Ansible's core functionality. It enables rich, flexible, and expandable feature set. So in this case, this become piece here that's highlighted, what we're looking at is this become, yes, this is just saying elevate your privileges. So if you're familiar with Linux at all, sudo su, we're just saying we need to be an elevated privilege, the root user in this case, to run this, this set of tasks, which, makes sense. And there's multiple plugins and different ways you can use those to make a more advanced and enriched Playbook experience. Sorry about that. Collections. The name kind of says it all with collections, doesn't it? It's a collection of things. It's a data structure, for lack of a better word, containing automation content. So if you want to loop or lump certain modules, certain playbooks, certain roles, certain tests, certain different pieces together to say, hey, this group of stuff really is what we use at its core in our DevOps team. This is stuff we come back to again and again. It's just a way to structure your data. And there's various use cases and different ways you can use it, depending on your business, depending on your organization, and depending on just how you want to structure your automation. But know it's there, and know it's simplified and consistent. It's basically just another way to keep yourself in line and keep yourself organized. So I talked earlier about the cloud services, and I talked a bit about the Automation Hub. So this is what it looks like. And the Automation Hub proper is the place you can go to look at that certified material we talked about, to look at material you've published, playbooks or automation that you've published, put out there for others, or go to the community, which is called Ansible Galaxy, and review automation that other folks have published. Maybe you want to just go review just to see if anything's out there that has been done before for a use case you have, or maybe you just want to browse to get some inspiration. Maybe there's stuff that people have automated that you never considered automating before. Well, you can do that by scrolling through the community in the Ansible Galaxy. It's a web interface, and it's sort of just your home for looking through all of your collections, all of this various stuff. And in Ansible Automation Platform 2, which is the screenshot you're seeing here, a container registry as well. We'll talk a bit more about that in a little bit. And this Automation Hub is great, and it's got your public content and all that lovely stuff. But there's also the private Automation Hub, which is your own home version for that, right? So if we take the Automation Hub and we say this is the world, the private Automation Hub is your curated version of the world, right? So take custom enterprise content, what you've made, take the Automation Hub at cloud.redhat.com, kind of that public stuff, and then take content from the Ansible Galaxy, synthesize it, and put it in your private Automation Hub, and there you go. It's your own set of stuff. It's one layer, sort of another way to structure your data, another way to organize yourself. And then it kind of feeds that into your Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform cluster, and then out so you can automate to deliver the automation to your user base. Oops, I went backwards, not forwards. All right, that's it for creating, and now we're going to talk about operating. So now you've created some playbooks, you've built out a few. How do you manage it? How do you run it, right? So now we're sitting here sort of to get our lay of the land of where we are. Automation Hub, insights for Ansible Automation Hub. So control source, this is where you're going to control, and then manage it. Red Hat Ansible Controller, again, instead of Tower. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then deploying it in the Ansible command line. So just the way to operate it. We're not talking about building playbooks at this point. We're talking about using them. So before I mentioned that playbooks run in a sequential order, and that plays run in a sequential order and tasks run in a sequential order, that's kind of what we're seeing on the right. So this, I don't know how well you can see this in the screen share, but what you're seeing here is that playbook that we looked at in the screenshot, the install and start Apache playbook, and you're seeing it run, and you're seeing the output of a run from that playbook. And what you're seeing is, the green here for that first task. Green means it was executed successfully and there was no change on the host. So basically, we just fetch some information and we're good to go. No problem. Okay, cool. Yellow means, hey, this executed successfully. We changed something on the host. So in most cases, when you're automating something, you're going to want to see yellow because you're going to want to see, oh, okay, something changed. Something happened. That's good. That's excellent. And then you sort of see, yellow, yellow. If something didn't work, you would see red, and then it would stop the playbook right there. So it does stop when something fails, just so hey, go troubleshoot this, go take a look, go look at the logs, see what failed. We'll talk about how to get to those logs in a slide or two. But again, in each task, the module does the actual work. So the order defines execution is sort of the key piece here, and then the output as well. So execution pieces. So this is a screenshot. I'm going to head this off of Tower, which is not the controller, not the new one, but the principle behind this sort of remains the same. So I left it in here. It's the execution is managed or done via central cluster or separate nodes. So if we're looking here at the central place, in this case, it's Ansible Tower, what we're actually looking at is a template. And we're looking at, hey, this is a pre-built set of fields or a pre-built set of data that we want to collect for folks that may not be wanting to write playbooks or may not be wanting to write their own automation. But let me put out a template and let me say I need to gather this information from somebody who's close enough with the platform to understand how to execute or how to put that information in. And let me go ahead and save it and then pass it up and basically enable my folks to push button and automate. Just give some information that I can understand as a business user, let's say. I understand which pieces I'm clicking here. I'm going to go ahead and do it, and I'm going to enable myself to automate quickly without ever having to write a playbook, which is really, really helpful. And you can sort of build those out however you need to. The other thing that's important here in Tower, this screenshot might just be a template, but it does other things. Obviously, when you're executing, takes care of your collections, syncs your Git repositories, and then takes care of credentials and logging. I'm going to hold on to that for another slide because I think there's one that explains it a little more in just a second. But again, it provides you your full audit trail, includes what version of content was executed, what values were provided, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the credentials portion, the inventories and credentials. So the inventories bit, I don't know if you can see the screenshot on the right side, but what you're looking at is a set of hosts, which in this case is Ansible and 4 routers 1 through 4. And you see on the right these related groups. So groups, you can think of these are kind of like tags, way to organize something so that you can say, hey, I want to see all of my routers, all my Juniper routers, all my Cisco routers, et cetera. You can do that. So some of these are tagged Cisco, some of them are tagged Juniper, Arista, et cetera, et cetera. Can be groups, static or dynamic, and you can do smart inventories. The other bit is credentials. So what usernames and passwords are used during connections, that's kept in here and is kept kind of behind the scenes in the credentials section. So rest assured, if you're somebody who's automating, right, when you're building out an automation script and you're running something, or an automation playbook in this case, you might have to have certain privileges or certain accesses in certain systems to be able to do these things. So if I'm logging in as somebody that's not even close to, let's say I'm a developer and I need to do something that the infrastructure team would usually handle, well, my credentials wouldn't get me that far. However, we can bake those credentials from the infrastructure team in the background of the automation and hold them and kind of keep them not exposed to the person who's doing the automation, so that when you're clicking in here and you're passing in the values, you can run the automation, but you can't fundamentally know, this is what the logins are, this is what the passwords are, and go in and change anything. It's just the ability to run the automation is kind of stored alongside with that credentials. So pretty helpful, pretty important point. I think I'm going to hit it again in a little bit too. Workflows. This is, to me, one of the cooler parts in the platform. So I'm a very visual person. I like graphic representations. And so on the right, I see this graphic where I see kind of a workflow diagram where I've got 4 different pieces of automation sort of stacked together, right? So all these 4 different things that are happening together in parallel, not in sequence, in parallel. And that kind of helps with my use case before. If we think back all the way to the challenges part, when I talked about being a developer and I talked about needing to spin up a container, instead of going and talking to 3 separate groups and saying, hey, I need this done, and then waiting on somebody to do it, and then going and saying, I will need this done, you can just come in here and you can pick, I need to do these 3 things, and I need to do them in order, and Ansible can run it if there's an automation, if there's automation built into Ansible saved for you to do that. And I think that's really powerful, and it's really cool, and you can sort of build out, I know these things need to go in this order, and you can actually leverage some approvals in here as well, some simple stuff. which can also be helpful if you want to make sure that somebody's not going in and just spinning up way too many containers or too many VMs, for example. So it's really a cool tool, and it's a cool graphic representation. API is near and dear to my heart. This slide is a long way of saying you can get to Ansible Automation Platform via API. There are entry points you can automate. If you never want to log in to whether it's Tower or Controller now, if you never want to log in and you just want to run everything through a middleware and you want to do everything via API calls, you can do that. It's a different set of skills and it's a different preference, but it's certainly possible. And we'll talk a little bit more about how those APIs sort of work in the new Ansible Automation Platform too when we get to that section. Dashboards, right? I think we all know in the back of our heads that it's important to sort of review outputs and see how things are going, who's using what, and see reports. Every sort of data point we put in somewhere, we kind of hope on the back end there's a report. So there are here in this case. On the left, you've actually got a screenshot of what was Tower, and it's the overview of the cluster, right? So this is more in the weeds of what's running, when are we spiking, when are we seeing the most jobs running, what's failed, what's passed, and you can sort of dig in. And this is sort of where you can start getting into the logs and start getting into, who ran what, when, why did it fail, all that good stuff. So it's much more focused on the actual automation that's running. On the right, in the automation analytics section here, this is more, this is actually cloud.redhat.com. And it's more about understanding who's automating, where are they automating, what are the top pieces of automation we're using, more trend-based stuff so you can understand, where in your organization are people taking the most use of Ansible, where are we doing the most automation, and sort of understanding also where are we not and where can we improve, where can we push this a little more, where can we give training, where can we enable our people a little bit better to use this tool. And as you can see there at the bottom of the screenshot, it's a little small, so I don't know if you guys can see it there, but top templates, top modules, that kind of thing. You can see, really the heavy hitters across organization as well. So just some cool data points, really key stuff. I think everyone really always wants to be able to know they can review this sort of information, so just know that it's there. Okay, we've built the automation. We've figured out how to run the automation. What if I'm just a consumer, right? I'm going to get the automation, but I don't want to deal with all the stuff we've just talked about. Well, we can do that too. So if I'm just a consumer, maybe I just need to go execute the automation. That's fine. Maybe I just need to log into Controller. Maybe I want to integrate with it. Maybe I don't want to go see it. Maybe I don't want to log into Controller. I don't want to log into Tower. I don't want to know how to write a playbook. I just want you to give me an API, and I just want to go ahead and run it against it, and I want to know I can use it. That's fine too. And of course, with all those content domains as well. So self-service. So really enabling your folks to push button automate. I know I've said that a couple times, but I think it's a really cool phrase because it's true. On the left, you've got a screenshot where someone actually has access into, in this case, it's Tower or Controller, where they're actually running a job. So teams that might be a little closer to the platform, know how to use it, be familiar with it, just giving them access to go in and run jobs and run automation. So you can access it directly, which is useful. On the right, you've actually got an integration here with ServiceNow, I think it is, but just sort of an example of stuff you can do where, I may just be completely a business user and I know I need to get something done, but I don't really know much about what does it, who does it, or where. If you build out these integrations, you build out these forms for your organization, you can just enable folks to just go in, log a ticket, and all of a sudden you've got some automation. It's a really cool use case for using automation across your organization, across your ecosystem. Role-based controls. I think this one's not too complicated, right? It's you want security. You want to make sure certain people can't access certain things within Tower, within Controller, and make sure certain people can't edit certain things. All that's there, right? So you can do privilege-based accounts, privilege-based users, all backed by enterprise authentication if needed. Stuff we expect these days, right? Just standard security stuff. So we talked a bit about, Ansible Automation Platform, what it is, why it's important, why it's great. But now I think that the key piece here, and that I'm sure a lot of you are here to hear, is what's new in Ansible Automation Platform 2, or 2.0 or 2.1, depending on what you're using. So a few key pieces. Before I dive into each of these individual sections, What I will tell you is a lot of what we've done, or what the Ansible team has done, I shouldn't say we, I didn't do it, I will take no credit, has done is really update Ansible to make it more compatible with containers, right? With where the industry is going, with more containerized abilities. It's not to say you have to be a container, an organization that leverages containers to use Ansible Automation Platform, but it's just sort of to make it more container friendly. And another point before I kind of dive into these new features, again, everything we've talked about to this point is still very relevant. It's not saying that anything that's new in AAP2 will make anything we talked about prior to this completely null and void, because it won't. At its core, it's still the same platform, right? So updated private automation hub for that container registry I pointed out earlier, hosting of private content, so just updates there. The big one, at least in my eyes, automation controller is replaced Ansible Tower. So Ansible Tower will now be known as automation controller. What we did there is split the execution plane from the control plane, and the control portions are in controller, and the execution portions are in these automation execution environments. And I've got a really cool picture later on that kind of shows how those pieces sort of work together. But suffice to say, it's just a more predictable, these automation execution environments, predictable way, a more reliable way to kind of develop and sort of execute automation than existed before. And then Ansible Builder, Ansible Navigator, new tools for enterprise developers. So, it's just developing automation for an enterprise is different than developing it inherently for, just a couple of servers or a couple of network devices. If you're doing it across an enterprise, you need a more kind of enterprisey native feel for how you're building that automation. And that's kind of what Builder and Navigator are there to do. So an execution environment. So it's take your collections, take your libraries, take Ansible Core, bundle it up in a universal base image, and you've got the execution environment. So components needed for automation packaged in a cloud native way. If we talk, I think I like this picture quite a bit. So you've got the creator on the left, and then the execution environment builder. And then, of course, you've got your execution environment and those pieces that we just talked about, all there in the middle, all feeding directly into your private automation hub. Same thing here for Content Navigator, same idea, scalable, supported, and execution environments and playbooks working together, passing information back and forth. This is sort of all of it put together, right? So this is users on the left, and then let's just say you want to go access your automation. You can go in via the web user interface, which is cool, what we talked about, controller, right? Or via API. If you don't want to go touch it yourself, that's fine. You can use APIs. And then you've got all that same self-service approval and role-based access control that we talked about in Tower. Same in controller, same kind of thing, same features, all that good stuff in the control plane, right? And all that feeds down into the execution plane where these execution environments are. So anything you do here feeds down into these execution environments, which then spits out the automation and delivers it out into your various domains, your various areas, right, in your ecosystem. Training at Red Hat, near and dear to my heart. So at this point, we've talked a bit about Ansible. We've talked a bit about, AAP2 and what's new. Say maybe you're really excited about Ansible Automation Platform 2, and you're really excited to get some training on some of the pieces for it. So let's talk about what we can do for you. So quick plug, trained people are more efficient people, and a trained organization is a faster organization, right? So 59% faster deployment of new IT resources for those who were trained, especially by Red Hat. So decreased time to market with training and Ansible automation specifically, right? So getting training helps. I think it's a sentence we kind of all know. Sometimes we can forget. So just a reminder, training is really helpful. And we can kind of deliver it to you in multiple different ways, right? So obviously with the pandemic, it's been a lot less in person. We started to have a little bit more uptick of in person. And then obviously I think recently everyone's a little bit iffy on that again. We can certainly talk about that, and it's something we can do. We've still done on-sites in person if need be, with certain protocols in place to keep everyone safe. But on-site is still there, but we've also done a lot of virtual training. Instructors have done a great job adapting to a virtual environment, a virtual classroom. And whether that's, in a public training with other folks from different organizations, or a private training where it's just hosted for folks from your organization, we've got both those options. And so you can do that kind of virtually with an instructor, or in person with an instructor, or via the Red Hat Learning subscription, right? Self-paced training, where you can just kind of go in a la carte, pick your courses, watch videos, do guided exercises and labs. Either instructors like to say, get your hands dirty, time on the keyboard to really kind of understand, in this case, Ansible, and understand how to write a playbook, write your own, execute your own playbook, see the outputs, make mistakes, make corrections, all in a kind of a safe place where making mistakes is okay. And then, of course, that all bleeds into, okay, I've taken the courses, but now I want proof. I want proof that I took it, right? I want the certification. We've got various ways to take them. So, of course, you've got your testing centers. If they're open near you, you can certainly go to a testing center and take an individual exam. But also, we've adapted to remote exams. So you can kind of take an exam from the comfort of your home. What I will say to you is we've had a lot of success with that, and people have really liked it. However, if you choose to opt for a remote exam, just make sure you give yourself a week or two to read the guidelines on the equipment you need, and the expectations of kind of what your environment and your room is like, just to make sure you're not surprised on exam day. Just proper preparation, nothing crazy. There's no crazy asks in there. It's just one of those things, just kind of to make sure. You'll boot up like from a USB into our exam environment image, and you'll just go off and running from there. So the Ansible curriculum, what training do we have on Ansible? So I've got two slides here, one for 2021 and then one for 2022. So 2021 is here because it's still got some stuff from Ansible Automation Platform and before Ansible Automation Platform 2. However, we're in that weird kind of tweener phase where we're going to have a little bit of both for a little while. So it's kind of dealer's choice on what you want to take, some last calls. The top portion of this kind of stays the same. So you've got this DO007, which is our technical overview of Ansible. It's more detailed than what I went through today, absolutely free. All of our technical overviews are absolutely free. You just have to go sign up on training.redhat.com. And it just kind of gives you an idea of, simplicity and automation technical overview, just a few videos on, what is Ansible, why Ansible, that kind of thing. And then you kind of see these three different paths, right? So you can do it for Linux administration, which, Red Hat's still Linux, very near and dear, very core to our business. So, that learning path's a little more built out, but you can take, system administration with Linux automation. So basically automating Red Hat Enterprise Linux with Ansible. And you can get a certification in that as well and sort of build that out even further with RH358. Of course, if you're a Windows person, we've got that too. Because again, Ansible can automate just about anything. So DO417, Microsoft Windows Automation with Red Hat Ansible. And then on the left, for network administrators, same idea. You can go take that Ansible for network automation. All that filtering down into our advanced class, which is DO447, Advanced Automation Ansible Best Practices. This is the one that's getting the Ansible Automation Platform 2 treatment first. So this course is currently has components of Ansible Tower, and then just advanced Ansible practices, for automating at scale, large scale automation, sort of managing that. In 2022, which is now, we're going to break that out and update it a little bit. So DO374 becomes that advanced class for AAP2, which is basically just your advanced principles of automation, your advanced enterprise automated scale with AAP2. And estimated Q1 2022, the general release date is actually today. So today's a great day to be doing this webinar, which means if you want to get in touch with us about taking a training, it's there, which is great stuff. So if you're chomping at the bit, now make sure you don't jump into the deep end first. Take some prerequisites. If this is your first time seeing Ansible, you might not want to jump into the advanced class, but know that it's there. And then DO467, which is going to be the class focused on Ansible Controller, basically for AAP2. Estimated Q3 2022, still subject to change. They're working on it right now and hope to have it out pretty soon. Oh, and another quick plug. Just found out that exams will come along to go with those two courses, so one exam each if you're interested in certifications. And that's it. I appreciate everyone for your time, and I'm going to pass it back to Olivia for any Q&A.
Hey Wes, thank you so much. That was great. I saw Rob was answering some questions in the chat, but if you had any last minute questions, please feel free to put them in the event chat because we have a few minutes left and we would love to get those answers for you.
Thank you, Rob, for fielding those while I was talking too much. Okay.
Okay, so as we're waiting for questions to come in, I'm just going to share my screen and I am going to put up the information again on where to access training after. And I know everyone is super eager to receive their gift cards from the Red Hat team. And I just wanted to ensure you guys that, let me just, oh, that they will be coming via email from the Red Hat team shortly.